Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your co-host, Rachel Cove. I am a multi-passionate entrepreneur, author, artist, mother, and certified recovery coach.
I'm your co-host, Arthur Mogilevsky, entrepreneur, girl dad, animal activist, and owner of AM Healthcare, a premier substance abuse and mental health treatment program.
With the collective experience of 21 years working in the mental health field, we are excited to bring to you a safe and fun place to talk all things mental health.
We will be interviewing experts, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals in the entertainment industry to better educate, inform, and inspire our community to have positive mental wealth.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your host, Rachel Cove, along with my co-host, Arthur
Mogilevsky, Rachel.
Whatever. We are joined in the studio today by my dear close friends and mentors, Kelly and Rudy Castro. Rudy and Kelly, co-founders of Conscious Partnership Coaching, are a married couple with 3 children who continue to do deep transformation work themselves, are professionally trained, and have dedicated their lives to serving others. They have collectively worked in coaching, counseling, transformation, and mental health for over 30 years, facilitated over 2,000 groups and workshops in the Los Angeles area, and have worked with thousands of people in the realm of healing, awakening, raising consciousness, healing trauma, and becoming free. Welcome to the Got Mental Health Podcast, you guys.
Welcome.
Woo!
Yay.
Thank you for having us.
This is the first duo of a podcast.
You're right.
This is our first duo. This is very exciting, guys.
Our first married couple duo. So
Right. Well, yeah.
We're setting the bar now.
So high.
So I want to go into the story of how did Conscious Partnership start?
It's a really great question.
I know, that's why I asked it.
The best part of that story, honestly, I like to start it off with it really was birthed out of the darkness of the night of the soul of partnership. You know, everyone's familiar with the dark night of the soul as a person, but we actually went into a dark night of the soul in our partnership. And actually that's what birthed our work. From that struggle, from that not knowing where to turn to really deal with the deeper layers of what we were facing after doing an extensive amount of work on our own, and then coming together and thinking, oh man, we are so ready for a relationship. We've done all this work on ourselves. And then boom, we got hit with the deepest trigger after trigger that led us into another transformation. And so as a result of that, we now stand in that tunnel of darkness as a light for other couples to do that kind of work.
Can you please define and go into what the dark night of the soul means for those who might not be familiar?
Yeah. And thank you for that. So, you know, it's not uncommon, right, that there's a moment that is so painful and excruciating in the human experience that becomes the catalyst for growth. Mm-hmm. And this shows up in so many different ways. For, addiction, alcoholism, it's like that's the bottom where you hit, and it's so painful that there's an opportunity for a moment of grace to come in. And it's the same thing in so many different areas. Sometimes it takes a loss of a loved one. Sometimes it takes physical illness, right? The moment where it just shakes everything up and really invites you into a bigger becoming of yourself. And so, it was actually really devastating on some level, shocking when this was happening in our relationship, because when we came in, we thought, oh yeah, we got it all worked out. Like we've just looked at all the stuff, it's handled. This is going to be so easy and so fun. So fun. And that's what happened. It's not that
fun. There was no fun in the beginning of our relationship.
True, it was a lot of fun, and then it wasn't. And so those places where the relational trauma that was really coming up in our partnership was a bottoming out of some of those deepest places within ourselves, and it was really painful. And it was that invitation into the catalyst of who we would become individually and together in partnership.
And just to clarify, there was no fun because we didn't even know how to have fun in partnership. We didn't grow up in homes where we were taught that it was okay to have fun. So a lot of our triggers was coming into as a blended family and being really constricted by our trauma and our reflection of our trauma to each other. And so there was no fun. We were really trying to create a family, but we were always confronted with like the deep levels of pain and having kids, what that was bringing up for us. And then so it just rocked our world and catapulted us to the next level of our own service and why we're here and our passion, our dharma.
And how long into your relationship did that dark night of the soul occur?
Like within 6 months?
Yeah, within 6 months after that, the glow of a new relationship,
You mean the oxytocin withdrawal?
Yeah, and that's the fun, right? It's like nobody would do any of this if there weren't some shiny moment on the front end. Because if I think we had to see the whole landscape from the beginning, it might feel like too much, what we were going to be asked to have to see.
How did you guys find the motivation to work on yourselves, to take that as a sign of like, let's get help, rather than that this isn't working, let's split up and go our separate ways?
Great question.
Yeah.
You want to answer that?
I mean,
I'm sorry, before you answer, I love this going back and forth. This is the coolest thing
That's
ever.
why they're the best. It's awesome.
This is cool. Sorry, go ahead.
We love it. We would both answer all the questions.
I can see it.
We have an ongoing battle back here. Who talks more?
Show me your feet. I want to see if you guys are kicking each other back.
I know,
and forth.
right? You're probably kicking each other.
Okay,
on
you
the
take
table.
this one, I'll take that one. Because Rachel and I do that with our podcast all the time. Like, Rachel, shut up. Shut the fuck up.
By the way, you can't see that at all.
Yeah, because we have a huge white table in front of us. That's why.
Luckily, he has long legs.
I'm just kidding. You can really see it. So, yeah, I mean, I will say that this is something that we return back to over and over again, just in our own selves, because the thing that we both walked in with from the beginning was a devotion to our own growth, no matter what. And so from the beginning, it was always going to be that. And, it wasn't about either of us necessarily committing to the relationship. It was about each of us being willing to commit to a deeper layer within ourselves. And I think all of the bricks that we had laid in the foundation for that already really allowed us to stand in that place in a solid way where it was like, look, no matter how this goes, I'm in it because it's my deepest work. And so we've stood in that the whole way through.
Follow-up question to that. I'm sorry, Rachel. Well,
raise your hand.
I'm raising both hands. we're practicing raising our hands here. I never did this in school, so it's really weird.
It shows.
What piece of advice can you give partners that get to a place where that realization comes to the forefront? One person is willing to put in the work, the other one isn't.
Yeah.
So that's an easy question, but also very complex question.
Sure.
It just really leads to what she was saying. What we have learned in our experience is that when we work with a couple, even if they come in and they all both have a different agenda, like we're really guiding them to doing self-work and teaching them how to communicate with themselves. But sometimes this happens and we have no attachment to outcomes in people's relationships. We don't even have an attachment to our own, in a sense, because we're just so committed to the work that we're doing. And I think we're just blessed and lucky that we get to keep staying together and working it out, and so when someone doesn't want to work something out, that might mean that person who is really working it out, if they are, because that can also be a false sense of I'm working it and the other person's not.
Very good point. Yeah.
So if they're really working it, when you know that they're really working it, what happens when someone is not at the right vibrational match as that other person? It's immediately a transformation that's going to take place.
Yeah.
Because the person that's willing to do that work, really do the work.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you said that. Can you please repeat that?
Yeah.
That last part. It's really, really important for myself personally in my own relationship, and for anybody that's listening. I'm gonna summarize, but then I'd love for you to repeat it in your way because you said it so eloquently and beautifully. That by really doing the work, if you're in a relationship where you're the partner that is doing the work, and you have another one that you have the other partner that's not, but you want them to do the work. It's not to will and force them to do the work, but it's to do it so deeply yourself that it's naturally going to catch on to your partner. Am I right in that, or am I missing?
Well, that's why, once again, I'll repeat the part that if we don't have an attachment to the outcome of a partnership, including our own, which means that as long as we both continue to do our work and we keep showing up and meeting to do this work together, then that trajectory is the same. And what I'm pointing out is if someone technically comes and says, well, I'm doing the work and I'm ready, and the other person's not, what you're really saying is that there's not a match right now. And so if the one person that's saying that I'm really doing the work means that they're going to have to confront the reality of making a choice, because that's what people do when they really do the work. They have transformational experiences. We're not just relationship coaches. We are really transformational coaches, and we're in the business of relationships. And so the business of relationship means that some people will get to a point and they are going to have to make a decision to transform, because that's what you do when you do the work.
And this is really important, honestly. Like, this is
The
a
most important.
really important piece, because how many times people come and they go, you know, I'm doing all of this work, you know, and my partner won't, right? And if somebody is really authentically not available for a dynamic, it will not exist in their experience.
Is that kind of like when Deepak Chopra says someone can only operate, I'm paraphrasing here, but with the level of consciousness that they live with?
Yes, and there's multi-layered elements to it when you're looking at relationship dynamics, right? Because what does that really mean when we break it down? Yes, I do really stand in the place that, you know, wherever we are in consciousness, our outer reality is going to meet that frequency. And so if we're looking outwardly and we really aren't liking what we're seeing, if we fixate on organizing all of the outside parts to change and shift so that our insides change, right? And we know these things, but it's interesting in relationship because it's really easy to focus on the person who's just right here in front of you. Right. So if we fixate on that, then we really lose the opportunity to utilize all of which is showing up in our experience as the reflection of ourselves back to ourselves, to look inward, to do that deepest transformational work. Because when we do it on the inside, organically, the outside changes. And sometimes, and this is what he was really speaking to, if somebody does that deepest work and the person in partnership will not join them, and they're not going to, the reality is the frequency changes and the partnership is likely to organically complete itself.
How do you tell that to somebody who's afraid of that?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Well, we just really honor the fear and we say we really understand. And it's the fear is what will keep somebody stuck in something within themselves that feels like prison.
And let me add this layer though, real quick, before we go on to anything else, because I can tell that you're integrating something. It's clear. Like even your body moving right now was like, whoa, and then you came back here. And so what I want to say,
the table couldn't hide that.
No, it was like a Matrix move. You were literally taking a bullet.
That's funny.
What I want to say though, because I really want to layer this on top of what we've just been saying, is that this is why when we meet with a couple and we're like, you guys ready to do some work like this? And they're like, yeah, I think so. We really start from the beginning that this kind of work is a year practice.
Yeah.
We work with couples at the stage that we're at now. We only work with couples for a year. Like the commitment level has to be at that level. The reason why is we know what we're up to. We know what we stand for and we know what we attract. So the layers of things that you're talking about is basically something that takes time to unwind and unravel and to see really where the transformation is going to take place in a relationship. And we've seen it in every way possible. We've seen people come to us premaritally and get married and then have build amazing life from the gate. You have people come with 30 years of experience between disconnection and hurt. And then there's rupture even in the process that we're walking them through. And then they literally have their 30-year ceremony, renewal of vows during the process they worked with us, and everything in between, from people coming in thinking they're gonna stay together and they leave, people having a conscious uncoupling, as it's called these days, to end the relationship and transform it. We've seen it all. So we have no attachment to the outcome, and neither should the two people involved in the relationship. They want to be really successful at a relationship.
Well, it doesn't mean that people don't have attachments, right? And that's the place you're really speaking to. Like, what if somebody's really afraid because of what might be found out in a journey like this? And so there's no rushing into that. Right. It's actually really working on a somatic level for when it feels safe enough to be in the exploration of that, because multiple things can happen. Right. It's like, one, you could really find that in the deepest rising of your own essence, it's an invitation. Right. If the other one really is scared, it's an invitation to rise too. And that may be received. Right. Or like, what if they don't? What if we really are asked to go in different directions? Like, that's a really tender place to sit with for the human heart.
Yeah.
And, it's really filling into the readiness of that, because in this kind of work, life does change. It becomes different. And so we've got to ask ourselves, are we ready for life to be different? And we might be, and we might not be. But if we stay in something that does feel like prison, there inevitably will be a moment where the suffering becomes too painful, right? And that goes back to the question you were asking about the dark night of the soul. It's like, how painful is this? Am I really willing to do whatever it takes to free myself? Because when one person frees themselves, both people get to become free. And what that looks like on the other side, we don't necessarily know.
Yes.
Yummy. So delicious. It's all so delicious. And I want to just sit in everything you say for like 10 minutes and just marinate it and be bathed in it. It's so good.
Great, because I have a bunch of questions.
Okay, no.
He's done marinating.
And we're done marinating right now. How do you think society's films and television have impacted our view on marriage and relationships?
Great question.
I know. That's why I wanted to ask it while I was marinating.
Great.
Can I just open that question and leave it a little bit more broader? Because when I hear that, I also see social media, press, billboards, magazines, any storyline anywhere that paints the picture of what in our society relationships look like or should look like, or all the variations of that. So as long as I can answer that question, then yes, I think it's a great question, because that really is much wider of conditioning that we're really born into.
Don't even get me started about dating apps, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh goodness, this is so good, because it really creates such a gap between what real intimacy looks like and the fantasy that we are so deeply indoctrinated with. And it's a really hard one because of all of the imprinting, right, of what we see around what romance is, what relationships are. And there's a lot of these elements where there might be conflict in some of the storylines, but it's not ever conflict between the two most of the time, right? It's this very fantastical idea that like the world, but like us, and, it's not a realistic portrayal. And for our generation, we grew up with an extreme version of that with all the Disney movies, right? And a damsel in distress that now Prince comes and saves us. And to unwind from all of that and to really understand what actually creates trust in a relationship is rupture. It is rupture. It's rupture and repair. And so when we both come from worlds that we never saw what it looked like for somebody to actually navigate a conflict in a way that created deeper connection with one another, we come in with absolutely no powerful skill sets whatsoever of how to navigate ruptures. And what I've seen now over and over and over again is the relationships that have the deepest roots of trust are ones that actually really can do that in a skillful way. Because if you are in a relationship where you've never had a rupture, how do you really know how that's going to go when something goes awry, right? Like, how can you really trust that this relationship is solid? How do you build secure attachments with other human beings if you don't navigate conflict? It's actually not possible. And so the portrayal of everything is so perfect and look how easy it is and look how blah, 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 that's not real. That's not real. So when people are in relationship and that's not what's happening, we immediately think something's wrong here. It's the relationship. This is it. I've got to get out of this relationship into a different relationship. And then we keep on this bizarre loop that really is this perpetual state of suffering that is not rooted in reality.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something you mentioned, and I think this kind of goes not just in relationships, but on your own personal growth and in business growth and just in general. We can only grow from dark areas. If everything's beautiful, nice, and dandy, how do you expect to learn and adapt and grow from that, right? And I always, anybody that works with me and, especially like, for example, COVID, freaking out. How do we adjust? How do we this? How do we that? There's so many moving parts as nobody's ever dealt with. And for me, it was kind of exciting time. I mean, it was stressful, but I was like, if we can survive through this, we're going to be able to survive through anything. There's nothing, I mean, with that idea, right? So I really love that you mentioned that, because that's so important for a relationship as well. I can't tell how many times my wife and I have been in dark place. I mean, we've been together almost 20 years now, and we've been in countless, but it's made us stronger, and it's given us the tools that we needed to be able to communicate during the dark times again. And I want to preface this going back to what you mentioned earlier. This isn't a quick fix. This is something that is lifelong. But the beautiful thing of what you said is that it's not based off of, because you're going to get hit from different angles. You're going to have social media, you're going to have movies, you're going to have dating apps, you're going to have work life, you're going to have personal life, you're going to have health. There's so many things, and you can't combat every single situation that's going to come at you. But if you focus on the one thing that's constant, which is yourself, and you're constantly working on yourself throughout your life, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. You'll be able to deal with it and handle it, right?
Yeah. Can I just say one thing to that?
Just one thing.
Just one thing? That's going to be difficult.
Okay.
I recently just saw the reopening of the Titanic in theaters.
Oh, the film?
And Rose jumped off the boat that was going to save her life to jump back on the Titanic, a sinking ship, to go hold her new boyfriend that she just met yesterday. And now they're totally in love. And I'm going to risk my life to go make sure I can hold this man and go down in the ship with him. And I remember sitting in the theater, I was like, holy shit. When you do this conscious work, it ruins film for you. Because that movie came out during my childhood, during my idea of building my conditioning around relationships. And that's what I saw. And I said, wow, these films have impacted us so much.
Yeah.
Yep.
I it's interesting as you were sharing that, though, there is a flip side to that I see. And I just really want to speak into it, because I think it's important that, like, yes, we get to review the way things have shaped us that no longer serve the current, like, consciousness that we are living in. And I think that's really important, right? But I don't look at it and I taint it. I've learned how to really find a balance in all things. And in this one, it's actually really important to acknowledge as well, which is the other side is that even though these movies and shows have a certain tinge to what we're talking about there, it also has spoken into and given life in imagery to what it means to sacrifice in relationships. Because I also see the other side, which is in a partnership where we have literally fought, off so many ways that may have torn down our relationship. And this idea of love comes through this struggle and sacrifice that we make. And then the beauty that comes after some of these kind of major events in all our lives. So people who are in relationship long-term and stay together and work things out, they understand this, and so I just also see that there is a beauty to what we have learned about what it means to be in a relationship, what it means to love someone, and really actually go to bat for that relationship.
So good. And she could have shared the raft. Brad Pitt said that. She could have shared the raft at the end of Titanic.
Yeah,
But I'm just saying, she could have shared the raft or what was it, a door? A fucking door. Anyway, I want couples who are watching this episode to have some like really good practical skills on how to work through rupture and conflict. And so I was wondering if you guys could show us, and for the people listening, if they can hear you kind of break down what it looks like to work through rupture. So like Kelly, if you're really triggered by something that Rudy does, because Rudy, it's always you, right? I'm kidding. And vice versa. If Kelly is triggered by something, if Rudy's triggered by something that Kelly did, how do you guys work through that in the moment? What is a conscious way of approaching conflict?
First of all, share the board.
Share the
door.
Share the door.
Door. What was that? Game of Thrones. Or door.
I'll just sit here and freeze while you have a little bit of warmth out there and die.
I mean, they shot it in Universal Studios. The weather was amazing. I don't know what they're talking about.
I love James Cameron.
Like, I don't know. It was sunny that day. Like, what are they talking about? There's some freezing water there. Sorry, James Cameron.
Okay. So this is where the rubber meets the road, right? It's like, it all sounds so great, conscious partnership, and it's a buzzword nowadays. Oh my God, I just want me some conscious partnership.
I'll take a conscious partnership with the side of conscious partnership.
Right. Like, okay, well, let's see about that.
Yeah, let's see.
It really does require us to be willing go so deep within ourselves. And a lot of times in a moment of rupture, the most beautiful thing that we can give ourselves is a sacred pause. So usually what happens in relationship, one person, right, gets triggered first, and then from a triggered response has a reaction that triggers the next person. And now we do trigger ping pong back and forth. And the thing that was like this big suddenly now is this big, and we don't even know how we got here. And oh my God, we've done this so many times before, right? So every couple has their own particular way that they dance, right? It's like a very specific ping pong experience. And what we have found over and over again is like that the root of it, usually if we break down, all of those pieces, it's like there's not very many different things that are going on in human beings in any given moment when we really get to the heart. But how do we get to the heart? So first and always, it's like, pause and see if we can get into some regulation in our nervous system. Because if we're trying to work this out from an activated place and both of us are in a trauma response, chances are it's not going to go very well.
And does sometimes pausing look like walking away?
Yeah, what does that look like? Like live? Because when you're in the moment and you're like jabbing and, playing tennis or ping pong or whatever, like how can someone, one or the other party, like what can they tell themselves? Like, okay, stop, move aside, right? So what does that look like?
Shouldn't go to prison. Don't go to prison.
Prison? We're going to prison.
Yeah, you go, it's easier said than done, right?
Right.
But it really does require the person, like Kelly was just saying, look at your nervous system. Can you even pause enough in that moment to look at your nervous system? Are you shaking? Are you rattled? Are you short breathing? Am I cloudy in the head? Am I completely separated from you right now? We haven't even, nothing has really happened yet. It didn't turn into anything yet. But is there like immediate recognition of all levels of your system that you can at least pick up one and be like, oh yeah, I'm triggered. Once you're triggered, the goal, and it is a goal, and it's not going to always be met, is that you got to remove yourself from the situation so that you can get some perspective. And over the years, yes, we've gotten better at it, of course, by far, but does it ever happen? Do we always reach that goal? No, of course not. There might be a moment of like, we don't remove ourselves, and then there's like a little bit of noise between each other, and then we take a break, and then we'll come back and repair and do our thing, and then move on. Like, we've gotten really skillful at that. Like, we can do that quicker than I think almost most people that we come across, but that took years and years and years of practice.
Yeah. And what it looks like today is not what it looks like in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Because there were a number of occasions we could not unhook from each other. We just could not, right? obsessive compulsive thing
codependent.
that is just, it just cannot unhook. And then it would blow, and I'd be like packing all the suitcases and I'm out. I mean, that's like a snapshot into the beginning of this dark night. Today, and we're going to give you a tangible practice actually that we use with our clients to just start being able to work with some of our triggers. But we have been working this process for nearly a decade, right? And so at this point, we're really well acquainted with what our triggers are, what our traumas are, the deeper places of sensitivity that we're each holding. We've created quite a bit of compassion and understanding for the other person's experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, right, not the quick fix, but it is 10 years of really building towards something where we have created awareness. We've created a lot more trust and a lot more safety in the partnership. And so what it looks like in a really loving way, even in a triggered and activated response, to take a pause could sound like, I'm really not feeling capable of meeting this moment right now in a way that is going to be helpful. I don't feel that I have the capacity to do it. I need to take a moment to take care of myself so I can come back to this and we can really work through this moment, right? That's like a really high level mastery. Now, getting to a place where we can really do that in a moment where it's heated is another thing.
Or a simple one, just like to start with for people, is like, I need space right now. I will come back to this. Like it meets maybe the other person's codependent needs, because we always have that, and fear. 'Cause I grew up with a lot of neglect and abandonment. So when she would remove herself, all the thing I needed was like, I need space. I'll come back. Like that would be like the caveman version of getting your need met. Like, I need space. I'll be back. Like that kind of simple.
Yeah.
I feel like Kelly's was like a platinum version, and then Rudy's like, I'm gonna give you the gold version, and then you can upgrade. If both extremely valuable, but there you go.
And I think
it's helpful because
super helpful.
Out like,
yeah,
wait a minute, you're leaving, and all the abandonment wounding is up. So it's a generous and kind thing to say, I need space, and I will be back.
100%.
Right? That is really, really, really kind.
that's really kind and beautiful
kind.
Because in that space, someone's inner child is literally feeling, I'm alone. I'm never going to have mommy or daddy in this moment, and I have to figure all of this out on my own. So I feel like those words of I'll be back is reteaching your nervous system. Hey, someone can be angry. Someone is allowed to be frustrated, and someone's allowed to have space, and they will return.
Yep.
Praise.
So it sounds like also redefining your perspective around conflict, right?
Yes.
Where conflict, like in your social media posts, you put out a lot, conflict can be an opportunity to restore intimacy.
That's right.
Can you go into that?
Exactly right. So, and this is going back to what I was saying, it's like, it's actually the moments that will create trust, because a lot of us didn't come from environments where it was okay for somebody to be angry or sad or fill in the blank, right? And there's a good chance that we might have been in situations where we were left alone or not really tended to in our hearts. And so to have moments where, we get to do conflict in a different way, where we are actually creating safety with each other, is so helpful in rewiring the system. And it's not from a place of codependency, right? It's actually both people being willing to tend to their own hearts first and then come back together with each other. And so there's a responsibility factor where we're each responsible for ourselves, and we are being generous with ourselves and each other in creating new experiences that give us a reference point for what safety can be in relationship. So this is the whole evolution of what it gets to become, but there's so many steps in between in getting.
And it really is kind of boils back to that old saying of it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that's why I think you guys are so skilled. It's the way that you language conscious relationship and the skills that are required to have a successful relationship that is really important. Why is language in conflict important?
This one. She loves words and language.
I mean, so language to me is really impactful, right? I have a system that has become really hypervigilant around language. So in that place, I can really hear, I'm listening for words, and I put a lot of focus and meaning, and I really connect them to my capacity to interpret where somebody's coming from, right? So if something is said, I'm really listening to that. And one word, like really one word can throw a whole conversation like that, right? And especially in a tender moment between partners. And we watch it over here all the time because we're coaching people in how to navigate conflict. And we see it. It's like that one word that you just like had to insert in there through the whole energy of the conversation, where now somebody really had the experience of feeling not seen, right? Disrespected, dismissed, dishonored, whatever the things are, right?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just was like, I know, thank you. I know you did. I just really wanted to add to that because it's so important, because I love her connection to words, because I'm not as connected to the words. I'm actually connected to the energy of the words. So like the words can mean whatever to me. It's the meaning behind that we associate, that we have a collective association with words. And so like when someone says certain things, it's the energy that comes with how they receive it. So I'm really more about the energetic side, but they're the same. It's really being able to learn how to say certain things and the impact that it has, and also know what you're experiencing on the inside so that you're energetically saying something as well. So it's like, it's this combination between consciousness that's related through energy and related through language.
I think that's, I'm sorry.
Thank you for apologizing. I hear that you're sorry.
Yeah.
Would you like to go?
No, go ahead.
Oh,
good reflecting back, Rachel.
Thank you.
You got the language and the energy right.
I had some good coaches. Go ahead.
No, I was going to agree with you, Rudy and Kelly, that I think even just in the simple example of staring someone in the eyes and telling them, I deeply love you, and then saying, I love you, and on the way out of the house, right? Same words, different perception, different connection in that moment, right? Yeah. So I agree with you 100% that energy behind what you're saying is a lot of it.
Yeah, and when you were talking, we have to be aware of each other's hypervigilance. Mm-hmm. The more we know someone, the more information we have, the more power that gives us and choice in how we want to respond to someone. And if I allow myself to be empathetic and compassionate and not judge your thoughts or feelings, it gives the relationship more opportunity to be safe and to be trusting. How important is it in relationships to not minimize your partner's feelings and thoughts?
Great questions.
Thank you.
I have to applaud you. I'm killing it.
Thank you.
Great questions.
No, what's the energy behind those words? Is it sarcastic or is it?
No. It's honestly like really good questions. Just like we really balance each other out with questions in a sense, like throughout our conversations.
But today it's more.
But today it's like really, really like, yeah. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being dead serious. It's really great questions. Rudy, stop putting me on the spot.
I think it's because I think honestly, I know you guys so well, and I'm so passionate about what you do. I know your ability to help people completely find themselves. And I've never met any other relationship coaches. I mean, I get emotional that work like you. And what you are teaching other people in their partnerships, it can completely reorganize a family system where there's love restored, where people are happy and there's peace, and it teaches people how to find themselves. So I'm passionate. I'm like, oh, I want people to hear this. I want people to know this, because if one person can change and then a relationship can change, other people get affected by that. And that's how we change the world, right? One person at a time.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Thank you.
So receive that, and then back to the question. Why is minimizing and invalidating someone's emotions and thoughts and experience really detrimental to a relationship?
Yeah, it really hurts our feelings. Right? That's fine. So when we live in a society and culture that we already feel so scared to be seen, right? And so we have all of these ways that we present ourselves in the world that are not really the most vulnerable places. And it's all so brilliant, and it's all for safety, and it makes so much sense. But when we're navigating life that way, and then we come into a relationship where we start pulling back those pieces and really deeply allowing the most vulnerable places of our hearts, our minds, our everything to be exposed, that's terrifying. I mean, it just really is. And why it's terrifying and why we covered it up in the first place is because we're so afraid of it being rejected, right? And so when we start letting down the armor, and we really start dropping into those honest places that we've hidden from ourselves and all of other human beings, it is really important that we're doing that in such a mindful and tender way in relationship, because it's a fragile part. It's a part that in the initial part of our life experience here did not feel safe to continue to exist, right? Like, that's how tender it is. So when we start opening up this realm and we start sharing with each other really, really honestly, it's important to slow those moments down, because the place that is starting to peek its head out is really, really needing to be honored and to be seen. And first and foremost, and this is why it's always going to invite us back to ourselves, we have to be willing to meet that ourselves first. So if we're attempting to get that from over here before we've been willing to get it from ourselves, that's where things are going to get really wobbly, and it's going to be more from a codependent place that perpetuates the pattern rather than giving an opportunity for it really to be a different experience. But as we start navigating those waters really of intimacy, where I have met myself and now I'm allowing you into these parts, to dismiss that or invalidate that is just such a painful experience, because it's already tender.
Well, it's creating such rejection. Sorry to interrupt you. It's creating such rejection. And I'm curious, this question is directly towards Rudy, because I think men have this innate biological need to provide and protect. And one of the ways I think that manifests a lot in relationship is to fix the feelings, is to control the feelings. So I'm curious, when you've walked through this with Kelly and she's going through something, what has your relationship been like to fixing feelings? How do you not do that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because actually what we notice is every human being, the man and the women, really have a hard time being in the state of what they're experiencing, especially in relationships. So both sides do this thing where in one way they're trying to fix it or cover it up, or, just deflect against it, or all these ways that we avoid. It's just avoidance of the pain and the grief that we're having. So even in conflict, what happens is there's separation, and both people don't want to be separated, because it feels the absolute worst, especially when you love the person so much. So when you're separate in conflict, because that's what happens in conflict, that's the first thing we have to accept. There's separation. And in that separation, when one person doesn't want to acknowledge the other person's experience, their experience, when we don't want to acknowledge it, we're not ready for repair, to come back to union. And so it doesn't matter who, and we see it both ways. Yes, men might have a harder time actually being in their emotional space, but in other ways, I've watched men have much more levels of intelligence, emotional intelligence, being able to actually express their feelings. Seen women who are overly expressive with their feelings, but can't really control and speak into and let the man into their experience. And it goes all over the place. Like in our relationship, I was the one that had to actually deal with my emotional life at a really young age, or else I was going to die from my disease. I got sober at 15, which meant that I had to, and I was in a place where I was healing from my emotional wounds. And so in that, I've developed a lot more emotional intelligence. I was able to process emotions for survival, thankfully, and in sobriety, that it led me, and being a counselor in mental health and addiction, and as a therapist for, almost 30 years or whatever, like almost 30 years, over 25 years. So I've been in this field, right? So like, and then I come in this relationship, and she hadn't really dealt with her emotional life like as long as I have. So see how it's not that way in this case. And it really doesn't matter to me. That creates limitation to the bigger story. And the bigger story is, when we have conflict, we're separate. None of us want to be separate from each other, especially in powerful, loving relationships. We want to be in union. And to get there in union, we both have to honor and acknowledge the other person's experience. And when both people are willing to have a mutual understanding of what they're going through, they can start to do the repairing process. And that can be small conflicts or huge conflicts. It doesn't matter. It's just literally the same kind of formula.
Right. So it sounds like when there's conflict, there needs to be a goal in mind to restore intimacy. And then how you restore the intimacy is through communication, through boundaries, through acknowledgement of emotions, through allowing each other to have their own separate individual experiences. I'm curious, with specific language, what are some ways you guys acknowledge each other when you have a rupture with one another? What are ways that you both like to be acknowledged?
In the repair, through the
like in the repair, like if Kelly, you come into the kitchen and you walk in and you're being super passive aggressive, and Rudy gets affected, how do you guys both hear each other? What are ways that you acknowledge the experience?
Yeah. So one of the places where people go down fast in repair is, or the attempt at repair, I will say, is to really come at it from, you did this and you made me feel this. The moment anybody is a victim and somebody's a perpetrator in any dynamic, and I'm not saying that there are not cases where this is happening, but when you're talking about a relationship where there's stability and a constant commitment to keep working through things, the moment that kind of separation comes in, it's like, now we have sides, right? Now we have a good person, a bad person. We have somebody who's right and somebody who's wrong. And this is the realm of conflict. And this is where conflict stays alive. And so we, through our process, and this is why, we say, okay, let's go at it for a year here, is because we're dissolving too a lot of the constructs around how we be in conflict, right? What we believe, how we organize things, how we create all this division and separation within ourselves and each other. So in that moment, right, this is where the languaging piece is important, because the moment I'm going to say you're going to be defensive. And now we're in a who's right and who's wrong kind of conversation, right? Because somebody feels bad and feels like they have to defend themselves. So these ways of really keeping things, it gets to be simple, but we really make it really complicated, because all the stuff we're working through as human beings, all of our fear, all of our pain, all of our shame, all of this stuff is the stuff that is getting in the way of it actually being simple. Because how that could go is, if I said something and I didn't maybe catch it, and he really needed to share with me a moment where he was feeling hurt, he could say, hey, when you came in the kitchen and said this, I was left feeling. And then if he's really intimately connected to what his experience was, I felt separate from you. I felt small. I felt an experience of shame. I felt, like I was doing something wrong, right? You hear the language in that, how it's really, really clearly him describing his own personal experience of how he felt in that moment. Not once in there did he say you were passive aggressive, that you did. That's where the division comes in. And so in those moments, it creates a lot of safety and openness for me to feel so oh my God, let me hear more about that, because I don't feel like I have to protect myself and defend my goodness based on what you're saying. So I can just really hear how that landed for you. And then it gives me a moment to go, wow, maybe what was going on with me in that moment. And can I take responsibility and clean that up and really acknowledge whatever my energy was in that moment, right? So again, simple, but how many places do we have to tend to get to a place where it gets to be that simple?
No, I mean, it's like anything in life, right? Everything is simple. We just complicate the crap out of it. and because everything that I heard you say was, again, very eloquent, very beautiful, and thank you for that, is replace the you with I and focus on the I, and then the you that you're referring to will eventually fix it, kind of want to fix it or work on it themselves rather than you kind of forcing it. So I think that's very, very powerful. I have a piece of a piece of question.
A piece of a question.
Yeah,
just a word.
No, it's just, again, very beautiful what you guys are saying. I appreciate your vulnerability and the transparency. So thank you both. Let's say you have a scenario where you have a couple that's gone through this experience and they got to a place where they have realized they need to move on with their lives, that they have to go in a separate direction, or they didn't go through this period, but they have a connection to divorce and separation. Like what kind of advice, what kind of connection do you give someone like that has a traumatic experience to a relationship with a different partner, or, went through your program, had a great experience, revelation, found their path, and might be afraid or dismayed into getting to another relationship for the fear of going through that again with someone else?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of grief for that person.
Hey.
Mm-hmm.
I'm laughing, but that was my experience, and you get through it. It's a lot of grief. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want people to know there's hope in the midst of that.
Yeah, no, thank you, because it's actually, we have a lot of examples of it, that there is so much hope, no matter which actual way it goes for people. But really what you're describing, that the struggle, that inner struggle, is there's like struggle in what you're saying, is grief. And some of the most painful grief that someone can go through, especially if they have past experiences of losing people, then that losing people could mean lots of things. Just loss. We're talking about grief and loss. And we really are not in a society that still knows how to manage grief and loss, even though we have a lot of language and words around describing how to heal from grief and loss. But this is something that we speak into all the time with every couple, because when there is separation, we're actually really dealing with grief and loss. So you're really speaking about grief and loss at another level. And we've both been divorced before. So I've been divorced. We both have kids from other relationships. So we have dealt with some of the deepest grief and loss before coming together. And some of the breakdowns that we've had over time have been related to working out all the grief and loss that has come up from our past. So, and then our generations of our families past, like separation and divorce and addiction and all that. So there's layers and layers and layers to this, upon then layers and layers and layers upon it, even when you think you've done it, and then more layers upon layers upon layers of the thing that you thought you have done. Like this is where someone who's more masterful at transformation understands what I'm saying. They're just layers and layers upon layers upon layers, and it's endless.
Yeah.
But there's freedom in every stage of that experience.
Yeah. And more when we're willing to actually move through it, because the last part of your question, right? Like, how does someone move forward without really protecting themselves when this has been so painful, right? To have to walk away from something. And it's not necessarily ourselves we're protecting our grief. We protect our grief when we haven't moved through our grief, right? And so this thing that he was speaking to about our way that we're trained in this bizarre culture that we're in, is that we honor celebrations of new beginnings, right? But we are not in the celebration of when things are completing. And it's the same place where someone's afraid of the dark, but you're speaking to this earlier. It's where everything grows. Where do babies come from? The womb. Guess what? It's dark in there. Where do seeds start to grow and sprout? In the dark, not in the light, in the dark. So again, the removing of these systems of what's good and what's bad and what's right and what's wrong. Oh, the light, it's so good. The dark is bad. Oh, is it? Is it? Right?
Once again, those words. Just those words.
So beautiful. Teach me your ways. I'm dead serious. I mean, just listening to you talk, I'm in trance. So
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. Huh?
You're welcome,
Oh,
because I brought
thank you.
them on here.
No, thank you. Thank you to everybody.
Thank yourself. Thank yourself.
Huh?
Thank yourself.
Thank you.
Well, just to speak to that, as someone who's been, and I don't want to make this about me, I just want people to know that, yes, divorce has been the hardest thing I have ever gone through in my entire life, and I've been through some pretty gnarly stuff. It has also awakened me to myself. And my ex-husband and I, we are able to co-parent in the most perfectly unperfect, but we are really good friends. We go through a lot of shit together. And also our son is a direct result of how we co-parent, and that how we dealt with the divorce. We're both in therapy, right? And we both want to show up for our kid in the best way possible. And sometimes that means separation, to be honest with you. Yeah. And so I just wanted to give people that hope that even though you might be going through a divorce out there, you might be going through some end of a relationship, accept that the grief just sucks. You're in a pile of shit. It's messy. Yep. And like you said, it's how you get through that mess. And you guys are, I mean, I'm going to cry. Like, you're one of the reasons I'm standing today, because of how you helped me walk through that. And so that's what is capable for people out there. And you, we can thrive individually. And I think with sacred partnership, we can thrive even more if both people are conscious. And I think that's what you're really trying to teach people. Yes. So a couple of last questions. If you had to give one piece of advice for someone who's entering into a new relationship, and then one piece of advice for someone who's ending a relationship, what would that be?
I would say for the person who's going in, I mean, for anybody who wants to even be in a relationship, it's like really getting to know yourself first. And it sounds so cheesy, but when we get into relationships and we really we don't have a clear understanding of really who we are in our essence, then we're going to be our personality in relationship with somebody else's personality. Now, the thing that I believe deeply is that that's all perfect too. Right. So like, however that goes, however messy it is, however many don't work, I actually really believe in the divine orchestration of it all. But take your time and get to know somebody. It's okay to actually really be curious about somebody else's heart, what they stand for, what their values are, to really take time to see if there is alignment that is going to support a foundation that you really want to build your life on, and have clarity about what it is that you want to create. That's the other thing. It's like, that's really helpful in any area of life, is to be so clear about what ultimately the vision is, not necessarily the details of it, but the characteristics, the qualities, the frequency, the field of that which you really desire, before sort of blindly just, going into things. And guess what? Like I said, all those serve a purpose too. So
beautiful. That was so good. And Rudy, piece of advice for someone who's ending a relationship.
Well, first, if someone's entering a relationship, I have it really simple. If you want to meet your one of your greatest teachers in life, get into a relationship. Like, if you're thinking about getting into a relationship, you should look at them as the next greatest teacher in your life. That's what I would say. And if you are contemplating ending a relationship, I would ask yourself this question: am I really ready for a radical transformation to take place?
So delicious, so yummy. I know I could be here for another 4 hours interviewing you guys, but I have to go pick up my child. I love you both so much.
Love you so much too.
Yes. If there's a couple out there or an individual that is looking to get some coaching from you guys or seek out what you do, how can people find you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. And also, you'll find this on there as well, because I said we were going to give a tangible practice of how to move through a trigger. And we didn't quite offer that here, but we have it recorded on a free masterclass workshop.
Yeah.
And so you can actually listen to this. I think it's 15, 20 minutes, and it will take you through a whole process of navigating a triggered response. So that's there, available for anybody who wants to have it. And it's on our website, www.consciouspartnershipcoaching.com.
Awesome. And you guys have a couples retreat coming up, right?
We do.
Yes.
Yay.
That's exciting.
Awesome.
End of April 21st through the 24th.
To the 24th.
And Joshua.
Fantastic.
And thank you guys so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
By the way, Lori says that you're welcome to come back anytime. And she misses both of you. And also, Rudy, your YouTube video for interactions is still a hit with 500,000 views.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I made the number up, but it's like some crazy astronomical number. And it always have been a delight to work with when we had the chance. So really appreciate you guys coming on.
Thank you guys
both.
so much. Arthur, why don't you go ahead and take that away?
What away?
The ending.
Oh, okay.
Completion.
Again, Rudy and Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today on the Got Mental Health podcast. And thank you to all of our listeners for joining in. Appreciate your feedback, comments, suggestions, likes, hearts, everything. And tune in for the next episode. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate both of you.
Episode. Mwah.
Bye, guys.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.